All right, what's happening, Don?
What's up, Jazz?
Another episode, it's episode 4.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Yeah, we are rolling. I wish we were actually rolling, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, episode 4. It seems like even though we said before we thought some news would, keep slacking off and not much to talk about, but quite the contrary.
Yeah, things keep happening, even without fights happening. John Jones keeping us entertained. The impact of coronavirus keeping us entertained.
Yeah,
Yeah,
talking about Jones, got to touch on that. Yeah, I feel like, I read his post or his statement, whatever you want to call it, and I just felt like even reading like halfway through it, I was kind of over it because it's the same thing. Sorry to my fans, to my family, for the people that I may have hurt, but it's like, how many times can you be sorry? You know what I'm saying? It's like to the point where like I actually don't really care anymore. Obviously I still want to see John Jones fight, but it's just like, kind of almost like stop the BS, and just actions more than words, in my opinion.
yeah, you do sort of feel increasingly like let down by it. There's a part of me that he's entered this plea agreement and he's got some community service to do, and he's pled guilty to the DIY, but you read his statement and you think, okay, he probably does have some legitimate problems,
Yeah.
some alcohol issues, whatever. But he's also got, it's sort of like you think, how much will it take for you to address this properly? I know Ariel Helwani was saying that he spoke to him a few incidents ago, and Jones was saying, I went to this rehab center. It was so amazing for me. I'm going to keep going back there every year. It was like it was so like good for my well-being. And then
Mm-hmm.
about a year later, Hawani says to Jones, so did you go to the rehab center last year for your like annual like renewal? And Jones like,
Right.
no, I didn't go. I'm chilled. So like at some point, like
Yeah.
you've got to like be willing to put in the work, I
Right.
suppose, whether
Work,
it's seeking help, speaking to a psychiatrist, whatever it might
for
be.
sure. I mean,
Yeah,
he doesn't sort the shit out, it's going to completely ruin his career too. I mean, we keep saying how many more chances, but anyway. And just quickly before we move on, would you like to see the Reyes fight, the rematch, over
yeah.
say
I mean,
anyone else?
I'd like to see that. For me is the fight that if it's going to be a John Jones fight, and if it's still a John Jones led division, that's the fight that has to happen, because I think it was really, really close. I lean towards Reyes.
Me
So
too.
you got to do the rematch. But John Jones has not had that many convincing wins in his last few fights. The Santos fight was also not convincing. So
Right.
I think,
I'd love to see that fight too, because I think Santos buggered up his knee pretty bad. Both his knees. I think he had double knee surgery.
oh really? I thought it was just the one knee. Yeah, so
No.
he was struggling for sure.
Yeah, and he took it to him. So
Yeah, but at this point, you can kind of understand if the division moves on without him, uh, and he sort of just has to deal with that.
do
But
you do you
I think
feel
it's good.
do you feel like it should be an interim belt, or like Jones should just get stripped now?
I don't know. It's so hard to say with these sorts of things, because the UFC doesn't have any real rules when it comes to these
Right.
things. Um, the only rules that it's sort of whatever Dana feels is going to work the best for the company in the circumstances.
Yeah.
I don't know. You think it's sort of strip worthy?
What's that, Reyes and
I mean, do you think Jones should lose his belt over this?
well, I think for me, if I was making the call, I think it would come down to time. So how soon can Jones return? If it's going to be like 6 months or more, I think the division needs to move on. The belt needs to be stripped just purely because of his actions. If he was injured, that's a different story. Then I'd say, you do an interim title. But because it's his behavior and getting in trouble with the law again, I think if it's a long wait for him to get back, the division needs to move on with a fresh title fight.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
maybe do someone like Reyes and Thiago.
yeah, and that might have factored into to how swiftly he sort of dealt with this in terms of getting the plea deal done. Um,
Yes.
might have thought, if I fight this thing, if I eventually plead guilty, somewhere down the road, um, everything just throws out my time in terms of getting back into the cage.
For sure.
I mean, that and the fact that it was so clear that he was at the least driving under the influence
For sure.
pushed him to
Well,
make that call.
yeah. Well, we'll definitely watch this unfold and discuss it as we go. And then obviously on the top of the MMA heap of news is Khabib and Tony. I mean, as we've been saying, what a roller coaster. I mean, 1 minute it's, you know, it's happening. Then we hear that Khabib's gone to Russia and the fight can't happen. And then we hear that now Russia's allowing in private jets. So maybe they can fly out the team and Tony there. And now I think it was this morning, Khabib came out with an Instagram post saying basically he's in Russia, in Dagestan with his family, and he's quarantining himself. And it kind of felt that he was, by what he was saying, he's like, the whole world's shutting down. The biggest companies in the world are shutting down. Sporting leagues are shutting down. You know, he feels like he needs to do what's right. And he's trying to set an example that, like, we need to stay at home. And there's bigger things to this fight, even though this is what he really wants. He realizes this is just an MMA fight. And we need to deal with kind of Corona and then come back and, you know, revisit the fight options.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with him. You know, I think I don't think Khabib went to Russia to avoid this fight. I really doubt that.
Yeah.
But once he gets there, he looks around him and he thinks, like, firstly, I think he probably was under the impression he couldn't leave Russia. And then he's looking around me. He's like, the whole world is shutting down. The whole world thinks it's responsible to just, you know, down tools, wait this thing out, ride it out, be with your families. He's probably thinking, once I go to America, how do I get back to my family? And he's like, you know, screw it, man. Like, this is how it's unfolded. What can we do? And that's given Tony the ability to be like, oh, look, we could get him a private jet, apparently, somehow.
Right.
And he doesn't want that, so he's ducking me. I don't think anyone who's not like a diehard sort of blinded Tony fan is gonna think Khabib's ducking him. You know,
I don't think either of these guys are ducking each other.
Exactly. Khabib's, you know, it's unfolded in the most unfortunate way, and Khabib's looking around and thinking, like he said in his post, put yourself in my shoes. Like, leave your family now in the midst of this thing with all this uncertainty, where a lot of people, all the experts are saying it's not responsible to just keep going as normal.
Definitely. And I saw that Tony tweeted something like, the only deserving people right now are McNuggets, aka Conor McGregor, and Khabib. So I feel like it's very unlikely that the Khabib-Tony fight's going to happen. And I don't see Tony fighting Gaethje, if, you know, from that statement. So I think, as we said in the last episode, this fight just needs to be postponed. There's also been so much trash talking, you know, between other fighters, just probably the lack of fighting happening, training happening. The only thing they can kind of do to keep the fans and the media entertained is like go back and forth with some trash talking. But you've seen it with Usman and Masvidal and Colby getting involved. And then I saw this morning Henry, Cejudo, Triple C getting, you know, talking some shit. So yeah, it's a crazy time. I do think that the Tony Khabib is the only fight that should happen. And the only one I could understand it replacing is maybe Tony and Conor. But otherwise, I think the fight needs to be postponed.
Yeah. So you think book it for a seventh? Is it a seventh? No, it's a sixth time.
It'll be a sixth time.
Sixth time. I mean, can you?
Yeah, because I feel like this time is kind of both out of their control. It's like, this is a world pandemic. I mean, this isn't like Tony tripping on a wire. This is not Khabib not being able to cut weight and go in a hospital. I mean, this is something that is out of their control, and this should kind of just be seen as like kind of a once-off, and they should 100% reschedule this fight.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But
with that said,
I'm not superstitious, but I kind of think you book it for a sixth time and we might have like a meteor hit the planet.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Yeah, and with that said, if that fight didn't happen, I wouldn't be unhappy if Usman fought either Masvidal or Colby. I mean, I feel like either of those fights are very makeable at this point. It just depends whether the teams and the UFC can get it together.
Yeah. For me, like the more I sort of come to terms with the fact that everything's on hold, sports included, the more I think
Right.
if it's not Tony and Khabib fighting, the right thing to do is just call it all off.
Definitely.
And I thought, I saw today Michael Bisping tweeted or retweeted that everyone who was going to fight at UFC London is going to get paid, which I think is really great.
Yeah.
I'm living in London for this year, and I was really excited to go to UFC London, and then it turned out that the card wasn't really that great, if we're honest.
Right. Was that headlined by Woodley and Edwards?
Yeah, exactly. So that was like an exciting fight, but
Yeah,
that
that's
was
a big
pretty
fight.
much it. And the tickets were really quite pricey. So I was like, I was not that bleak personally that the thing was called off, because I wasn't going to go, but that's sort of beside the point. I was glad that everyone got paid, and I think, people can get paid again. The UFC can afford it. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. And to push ahead now with a card that's going to feel disappointing anyway in an empty stadium just feels awkward. People can spend.
And you got to think that the Khabib Tony fight is such a revenue generator for the UFC to like lose the gate, lose all the income in other ways, especially when they need to kind of maybe generate some sales after this COVID period is done. It would make sense to let it rebuild now. I mean, it's just every time this fight's canceled and it just becomes bigger and builds and builds and builds. So I think financially it would be smart of the UFC to wait until they can fill a stadium or fill an arena and make some money off this fight.
Yeah, and you can, I don't know how this would work out, but it would seem to me that it's possible to take the Woodley Edwards fight, keep the Rose fight going, and put them all on the sort of super post-coronavirus, or not post-coronavirus, but post-lockdown card.
Yeah.
That people just are like so excited for, just on edge for some MMA again.
Yeah.
I
mean, I was listening, I can't remember the exact details and which virus it was, but one virus hit Canada. I can't remember if it was MERS or what it was. And they said what they actually did to kickstart it, and I don't know how accurate it is, they brought the Rolling Stones to Toronto just to kind of get over that period, to get the economy kicking again, get people back out. So yeah, the UFC could do something similar when they bring in just like a monster card and, get firing again.
Yeah, it was some sort of doubleheader. Like the WWE is doing WrestleMania over 2 days now in their empty stadium. I think it's like also quite awkward. Is it really worth doing WrestleMania in an empty stadium? But there are ways that people can get creative. Do a full weekend UFC event.
No, bring in maybe something else, like bring in a jiu-jitsu tournament, like EBI rules, and then bring in some K1. And I don't know, as you say, get creative. You can figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, Don. Covered quite a lot. How's the exercising going? Are you getting creative? Or have you been able to find something to do?
I'm doing more yoga than I usually do.
Very
just
nice.
because of the sort of constraints of space.
Yeah.
And then I've been following like GSP and doing a little bit of the stuff he's doing on his Instagram for like balance and core strength.
Nice.
And then you can play that psychological trick on yourself where you're like, oh, I'm doing what GSP is doing, so it's all good.
I'm a beast.
I'm a beast. Yeah, I got this Down Dog app. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's sort of like it's a yoga app that you can say exactly what you want to work on, how long a session you want to do. It's quite a cool thing. Yeah.
Very cool.
What about you? Still doing the 5K runs around the
I tried to do one yesterday and I just got so over it because it's so monotonous.
Yeah.
So I did 2.5 Ks and then I grabbed the kettlebell and did some kettlebell swings and some all sorts of different kettlebell exercises. There's obviously awesome content out there now on Instagram and YouTube of all these cool at-home workouts.
Cool.
But I am losing my shit a little bit. I would love to just like get on the mountain for a run or just get out of the complex or the apartment building.
Yeah.
I did start watching John Danaher's solo drills on YouTube. So as I said, you've got these 4x4 mats. So I'm going to start doing that. Maybe take like 10 solo drills and incorporate it with some kettlebells, some push-ups, stuff like that. So yeah, going to get out there. It's so frustrating. Like I'm looking outside now. It is an absolutely beautiful day, like perfect temperature, sun's out, perfect day for a run down to the beach. But as I say, we keep things in perspective. I was watching a video earlier about the townships here in South Africa, especially in Cape Town. And it's so unfortunate what's happening here and the circumstances. I guess the coronavirus is kind of highlighting a lot of the issues in the townships. So the same as the water crisis did. So I'm just, continuously keeping perspective. Yeah, I'm kind of agitated at home, a little frustrated, but I'm very fortunate that I'm comfortable at home with enough food and everything.
Yeah. It's actually the same sort of weather thing happened in London, where as soon as the lockdown hit, the skies cleared.
Yeah.
As I've said before, like our lockdown, we're still allowed to go out once a day, but it's a very different situation to South Africa, where the lockdown is actually stricter, even though like there's less fatalities and a lot less cases in London so far.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know, I don't do well with like data and like scientific analysis, but from what I can tell, the numbers in South Africa are growing at a much slower rate than some other countries have. So
much slower.
So I think Cyril got in. I mean, not quick enough like that it's not going to be a massive problem, but it helped a lot, I think.
No, for sure. I think one of the issues, what I read within the last 2 days, the figures are obviously changing, is there's been about 45,000 tests in South Africa and about 1,300 positive cases and I think 5 deaths. So if you look at that compared to other countries, it's much better data. But what worries me is now that they're rolling out testing centers within the townships and the more populated areas, we might see a spike. Just because it's hard in those communities to keep people separated. They're going to the store on a daily basis. I mean, I saw footage from, I think it was Khayelitsha. I mean, people are queuing on top of each other to get into the store. So it's a very difficult situation. So I hope it doesn't spike there. And hopefully the numbers do continue to rise very slowly. And then after this 21 days, they can ease the lockdown.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we've spoken, I don't know if it's on the podcast or off the podcast, about like these guys like going surfing in J Bay, when like some people are like being forced to be in their shacks that they're sharing a room with a lot of other people.
Right.
And I mean, it's a tough situation. We don't know how it'll play out, but I think we know that the early moves by the South African leadership were essential. So how far that carries us, we don't know. But
yes. I just wish they would also use this time to realize all the issues and structural issues, face infrastructure issues facing the townships, and try that this coronavirus, as I say, is highlighting to try and address some of the problems. But obviously, there's many flaws within our government. But as you say, at least they did take some early action. Yeah. All right, Don.
Sweet Chaz.
That was fun. Thanks for the chat. Let's reunite maybe in a day or two, see what's happening. John Jones, Khabib, Usman, Colby, see what's happening, and take it from there.
Cool. Looking forward.
All right. Ciao.